Well, hello there, and a very good afternoon to you. Greetings from Brussels, and welcome to this event, the aftermath of the 2021 German federal election analysis of the results and the implications for Europe. This event is organised by the Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung for the European Union and also the representation of the State of Baden-Württemberg to the European Union. My name is Maeve McMahon. I come from Ireland, but I'm a reporter here in Brussels with Euronews. So for the last couple of years, we've been keeping a very close eye on these elections and what, of course, the implications for Europe and for the European Union will be. So I'm very personally and professionally very excited to be here with you this afternoon for what looks like a fantastic, stellar event. A little bit later in the panel, we'll be hearing from Franziska Brantner, a member of the German Bundestag for the Alliance 90 and the Greens. We'll be hearing from Sven Giegold, a member of the European Parliament, of course, for the Greens since 2009. We'll also be heading over to Paris to get analysis from Paul Maurice. He's a research fellow at the Study Committee on Franco-German Relations at the French Institute of International Relations. And we'll be off to Berlin to speak to Brik Medak, the head of the Berlin office of the think tank Third Generation Environmentalism. But first, without further ado, let's bring in our two hosts. And that's, of course, Eva van der Racht. She is the director of the Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung European Union office here in Brussels. And also Bodo Lehmann, speaking to us also here from Brussels. He's the head of the representation of the State of Baden-Württemberg to the European Union here in Brussels. So Eva, the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, May, for your kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome from Brussels to our debate on the Bundestagswahl, the German federal election 2021. Please allow me a few introductory remarks on its results and implications from the perspective of the Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung, the German Green political foundation. The election took place in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has tested European solidarity and cooperation. The question, how the next German government will define its role in Europe and the world, and how it will tackle the multiple crises we are facing, is obviously of utmost importance, not only for Germany. Unfortunately, the role of Germany within the European Union and its international responsibility have not been discussed intensively during the last months. The lack of international priorities and agenda setting are, from our perspective, disconcerting. We would have wished Europe had played a more prominent role in the public and political debates leading up to the election. The election results show a remarkable shift of the political landscape. The CDU-CSU obtained their worst result ever. Three parties gained votes: the Social Democrats, the Greens, and the Free Democrats. Although the German Green Party aimed at and hoped for a better result, the German Greens achieved their best result in their party history, running for the first time for chancellorship. After years of being the smallest parliamentary group, the Greens are now the third strongest party in the German parliament. The Greens also gained a noteworthy number of direct mandates, and I'm therefore very pleased that one of the successful Green direct candidates, Franziska Brantner, is here with us today, and I would like to congratulate her to this great success. Due to the gains of the Green Party, the new German Bundestag will be younger and more diverse, which is a very promising outcome of this election as well. Well, we do not yet know how long the coalition talks and negotiations will last. Nevertheless, what we know is that the negotiations will be tough. Interestingly, Olaf Scholz as well as Armin Laschet claimed the day after the election that they want to make Germany fit for the future, that they want to move the country finally forward. After years of delaying and tempering progress and political ambition by the Grand Coalition, I have to admit that these announcements sound a bit bizarre. Just a few months ago, the German Constitutional Court demanded changes to Germany's climate law, stressing it places too much of a burden on future generations to reduce carbon emissions. The amended law is still not compatible with the Paris Agreement. Annalena Baerbock stressed that the Greens want to be a part of a government ringing in a new age. We need a committed, forward-looking and pro-European German government fit for the challenges of our time. A German government pushing forward ambitious projects of European and international cooperation, such as the European Green Deal. We need a German government not afraid of explaining to EU citizens that inaction and unambitious political targets will be far more costly than ambitious efforts and measures to tackle the climate, global health, and biodiversity crises. The German Constitutional Court made it clear, tackling the climate crisis means to ensure the freedoms of future generations. We need a government proving that a socially just, ecological, and digital transformation in Germany and Europe is not only a dream for the future, but that it is a core political and societal project we have to implement and fill with life from today on. In closing, I would like to thank our speakers for joining us today. I would also like to thank the representation of the state of Baden-Württemberg to the European Union for the excellent cooperation. My special thanks go to our moderator, Maeve McMahon, and my colleagues, Joan Lanfranco, Zora Siebert, and Melanie Bernhofer for organizing this event. I'm now very much looking forward to an inspiring discussion and would like to pass the floor to Bodo Riemann. Thank you for your attention.
Well, hello and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, also from my side, from the side of the representation of the state of Baden-Württemberg to the European Union. Our Secretary of State for European Affairs, Florian Hassler, who can unfortunately not be with us today, asked me to transmit to all of you his very best wishes for a successful and instructive event. A special welcome from our side, obviously, it goes also to all the speakers and panelists of today's event. Franziska Brandner, Sven Giegold, Stefanie John, Britt Medak, Paul Maurice, and our moderator, Maeve McMahon. Let me just congratulate also from my side to you, Ms. Brandner, to your very convincing re-election. It's a great result for yourself. It shows also the successes you have delivered over the past mandate and the trust your voters put in you for the weeks, months, and years to come. Congratulations and all the best. Please let me also thank Eva van der Ragt and the whole team of the Heinrich-Böll Foundation's EU office here in Brussels for the good and smooth cooperation in the run-up to the event. Ladies and gentlemen, Eva, you said it before, over the past months during the German election campaign and a couple of weeks before the election to the German Bundestag, we could observe here from Brussels a strange dichotomy. European and international questions were hardly ever debated in the election campaign in Germany, while at the same time you could see many observers and policymakers, not only in Brussels but also in the capitals of the member states, following the debate and the campaign very attentively, not only the debate, but also the statements of the different candidates. And indeed, this is an election that we never had before in the past. An outgoing chancellor was not representing herself. So there was clearly only newcomers, in inverted commas, who were running for one of the most important posts in German politics. The political course so was set anew, new faces, new priorities, and new policies. This is what was at stake. But given this strange dichotomy, I'm very grateful that today's event is not only discussing the outcome of Sunday's elections, winners and losers, coalition options, strategies and tactics for the weeks, hopefully not too many months to come, for the coalition talks, but also looks at the implications this election result has beyond Berlin, beyond Germany, has for the European Union as a whole. In that respect, and I think it's not a surprise and a coincidence that there is also a guest, a panelist from the IFRI here in the panel. Our partner and friendship with our Western neighbor, France, will play a very important role. A stable political relationship between the main political actors in Berlin and Paris, which is based on mutual trust and confidence, has always been an important prerequisite for a well-functioning and successful union. And this is probably all the more true now in the coming months. France will take over the presidency of the Council of the European Union in the first half of 2022. And then we have also important elections, presidential elections coming up in France in the very same year. Ladies and gentlemen, I know that you are as curious as I am to listen to the experts, to the politicians who are sitting on the panel for us today. So I'll keep it short. I'll stop here. And we'll hand over now to Ms. Joan. Ms. Joan, the virtual floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Before you come in there, I just wanted, just in case anyone's joining us a bit late, welcome all our viewers and remind them that they're here joining us at this event, the aftermath of the 2021 elections organised by the Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung and the Baden-Württemberg representation here in Brussels. And as Bodo Lehmann perfectly pointed out there, even though these elections were taking place in Germany on Sunday, the whole of Europe was watching, and the headlines on Monday morning all around the continent were all about the elections and what the implications will be, how the continent will have to be in pause mode, waiting mode for the next couple of weeks and months to see when the coalition is formed, and of course what impact that will have on policies here and on how EU summits will change, the role of course that Angela Merkel will be playing when she's coming. So it's fascinating to see how every single member state of the EU was trying to how these elections are having such an impact on them, whether it was Romania and whether they'll be invited into the Eurozone and Schengen, or whether it was Portugal, with Portuguese newspapers expressing how important the new Bundestag is. It'll impact, of course, inflation rates in their country. So huge elections with massive consequences for the whole continent. And with that as well, we would like to know where you are all joining us from today. So we have a question for you, because we want to make this talk a little bit interactive, because I don't know about you, but we're all probably a little bit zoomed out at this stage. So it's good to keep these events pretty interactive. So I'd like to know where you are joining us from today, whether you're joining us from Brussels, Berlin, the rest of Germany, another EU member state, or outside the EU. So if you'd just like to click where you're joining us, and then in just a minute, we will find out. So we should find out in just a minute where you're all joining us from. Robert, our technician, will be pulling up those results. So, okay, the majority of us are here in Brussels. So very warm welcome to you. Thank you so much for being with us. And thank you as well to Sven Giegold, who has joined us, member of the European Parliament, of course, for the Greens since 2009. We have also Paul Maurice, we have Brick Medic, and we have Franziska Bratner, who's also joining us. But first, Stephanie John, the floor is yours to bring us some analysis that you guys have been putting together over the last couple of days. Stephanie John, the head of political party and research here at the Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung. We're actually here in Berlin today, so the floor is yours, Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you. Just, yeah, okay. Eva already presented the highlights on the federal election results. So, of course, we have seen a tremendous loss for the CDU. The SPD has gained the highest vote share of all parties. The FDP reached stable results, and the Greens had achieved the greatest gain of all parties and reached the best result in history. And as Eva already mentioned, but they remain below their expectations. But I would also say it below societal expectations. For sure, we have the results in a strong shift in the composition of the next German Bundestag. What is quite amazing at this time is that this shift not also results from the lists, the candidate list, but also from shifts in direct candidates. So the CDU lost in several regions at direct candidates. And what is something particularly new, that the CDU significantly losses votes overall the German Republic, especially in more, rural regions. The Greens, gain their results and best results, as we know, in city and urban areas. So this is mean the classical traditional areas where the Greens are really strong. But we can also see that in more rural areas, the Greens gain votes. And this is something really interesting and new. What I want to highlight now is that the election results stand for continuity and change in the German party system at the same time. So when we see the continuity, so that means that we have still 6 parties in the party system that are relevant. And we can see in this longer perspective that the time of party system that is dominated by the 2 main parties, SPD and the CDU, is over now. And it's something that is not really happened at the moment now, but it's an historical development, and we can see so it continues here, but now it's related to change. So it means change means in this case that this no longer the CDU or SPD has a large a dominant role any longer in this party system. So it means that we can see now in this coalition in the upcoming coalition talks that that especially the SPD is not the party that makes the first move. So these developments of historical perspective, that we have no longer these 2 dominant party players, will actually opens up new potential for formed coalitions. But actually, it needed different expectation what parties actually can reach in coalition government, because they're different. But now we have more than 2 players there, and what we also see that I already mentioned that we see differences between classical difference between urban and rural areas. We also see that these election results stand for differences and divergences within the country. I want to highlight here how a comparison between the federal election results and the results that were reached at the land level at the same time. And here you see the differences. So and the picture illustrates that we see that the results, the overall results, not really displays what we see at the land level. So we see a huge difference between the federal results and the results at the land level, especially the eastern Bundesländer. So here we see we have a strong AfD, and the strong Linke. They are over the mean in at the federal level. And on the other hand, we see that the losses, for example, or the difference as the CDU, though there are more losses in the great metropolitan areas and as well in the eastern Länder. So, however, when we have these strong differences, it might be more difficult than for the next political steps when you try to build up a change agenda that should be supported by the whole German population. Then it might be more difficult to get this support on the background of such divergence. The second disparities and divergence we see actually between generations. So what we see that the older generation votes for continuity, for stability, so more for issues like social security and the issues of economy, and they gave the power to the CDU and the SPD. So and the younger generation, in contrast, vote for change and favored the party that they wanted to put more the emphasis on reforms and change, like the Greens and the FDP, like the issues climate change and digitalization. So, and what we see now is that the younger generation support the smaller parties, that the older generation supports the foremost large parties. And this generational divide and generational gap was never so huge as before. So it's really an interesting phenomenon and something I would say very challenging for the next for the future. I'm sorry, it was too. Afterwards, I want to give some words on the coalition. So we have seen at the moment, we have actually 3 possible coalitions, but I would say political, there are 2 options more effective or more, so I would say more popular than the other one. I would say the significant or the chance that we will see in the grand coalition again, I would say was not that high, as we see that the population will not no longer stand behind this idea, and the idea of we looking for the minimal consensus like the last year, I would say, will be no longer this solution that we will see. Then we have the 2 other possibilities and of the traffic light coalition and the Jamaica coalition. And what is quite interesting here, so that means that we see really a change then in Germany, is that the smaller parties are made the first step. That the smallest parties are pursuing the strategy of first agreeing amongst themselves and then approaching the possible chancellor party. And this is something quite innovative approach, and I see, and it's combined with a new role in the party system. Overall, to their questions, because we're talking here about the European perspective, so we say, okay, Europe, the question of Europe or the perspective on Europe has had no place during the election campaign. So the issues were really strongly focused on the need for transition in Germany, reform, new chances, on social innovation idea, climate change, and so on. But it was really focused on the German perspective, but not that on the European dimension. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Super interesting analysis there. And yeah, now let's bring in our experts without further ado. From Berlin, joining us this afternoon, we can welcome Dr. Franziska Brantner, a member of the German Bundestag for the Alliance 90, the Greens, and the group spokesperson for Europe. And as we heard already, she was re-elected at Sunday's election. So good to see you there, Franziska Brantner. How are you doing? Haven't seen you in a couple of years. We used to see each other a lot in Brussels, so lovely to have you here.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, I am quite happy about the result. I got directly elected, so it's nice, over 30%. So yeah,
I can imagine you're pleased. So what is the mood like there now today, Wednesday? I mean, because here in Brussels we're feeling very far away from Berlin and from the atmosphere. Of course, we were all watching it on Sunday unfold from our screens as of 6 p.m. But just bring us in a bit to the mood there where you are.
You know, we're already in the mood or now in the stage of preparing negotiations, or, you know, talks have already started between Greens and Liberals last night. They will be followed by, talks to the other parties. So here the mood is already...
Yeah, we saw that on Instagram. We saw some selfies on Instagram this morning. So yeah, we're all monitoring that. I'm just going to bring in our other panelists. Well, you can fix your camera there, Sven Giggles. Good to see you there. You're, of course, member of the European Parliament since 2009 for the Greens, and you are the spokesperson for the Greens European Parliament delegation. So thank you so much as well for joining us. And what's your initial reaction to the elections and how they turned out?
Well, look, it's first of all, of course, a big step forward and success that it seems difficult to form a government without the Greens. And this will give us the possibility to shape key issues of the future of our country, but also having a strong influence over future debates in Europe. And we will take that very seriously, and we will work hand in hand to make that work. You can see this symbolically that I'm sitting already in the office of Franziska Brantner while I'm joining you, and she's just one coffee machine and 2 rooms further. And beyond that, we will also be, of course, now trying to make the most of it. We know that the main reason why we speak first to the Liberals is not because we will then have everything done and then choose one of the two partners. I think that's taking a bit far, although is of course remarkable that Greens and Liberals together have more MPs than any of the larger parties, and it's also. But the main reason for this move is to try to find first common ground, because it is not easy to see, not difficult to see that the differences between Liberals and Greens are in any of these constellations are probably quite far away. And in particular, the most likely coalition, which is the traffic light coalition, there the main problem is how to reconcile these two groups, knowing that some of the policies of the two parties are provoking rather negative reactions in the electorate and the party of the others. So therefore, this needs careful management. At the same time, one has to be very clear. The loser of this election, and this I would like to add to the analysis, is clearly Armin Laschet. He is the loser. He lost most of the votes. We won most of the votes. And therefore, in the eyes of citizens, it is hard to imagine that Mr. Laschet will now become chancellor. However, we are not excluding the Jamaica option. When you negotiate with Social Democrats, you know you should never exclude any alternative option. I'm only making jokes. You don't get anything for free. So, of course, democratic parties should be able to cooperate, but it is very hard to see how a Jamaica government could ever be justified. So the price for that would be so high to us, probably unpayable. But, well, never exclude anything, and that is not wise. For us, it's, of course, a key priority to negotiate some of the key EU issues, but I guess we get to that further, and I will add then to that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sven Giegold, for those opening remarks. Good to hear that you're also in Berlin there with Mrs. Bratner. And as you might have seen earlier, we did a poll here to our viewers to find out where everyone is joining us today, and the majority is in Brussels. So you alluded to the fact that you want to hear more about the implications for Europe and how this will impact the EU. And I think our viewers will certainly want to hear more on that. But now we can head over to Paris and bring in Paul Maurice. He's a research fellow at the Study Committee on Franco-German Relations of the French Institute of International Relations in Paris. So Paul Maurice, you've been watching this all from Paris over the last couple of days. What's your initial take? What's your takeaway from the outcome?
Hi everyone. It's not a big surprise, the results. I mean, it was a trend before the election, and I agree. The European and also foreign and defense policy wasn't there during the campaign, and we have to talk about this because there is a great expectation from France with, as it was said, the presidency of the Council of the EU in January. And from France, we see new partners with the Greens and with the Liberals. And my job is also to explain in France what are this party, what are the differences between the French and the German Greens, and what are the purpose of the Liberal Party. And you know that in France, for the government, there is the government is afraid with the Liberals because of the financial and budgetary issues and so on. And maybe I think it's really a good thing that the Greens and the Liberals are talking together, because they are the two parties which are the most bigger differences, budgetary, financial issues. Yeah, and in France, there is also big expectation with the government, and the expectation are that the negotiation goes quickly, really quickly before Christmas, because we need a partner. We need a German government.
We need a German government before the whole continent starts talking about France and the French elections that, of course, will be taking place in April, and the French presidency taking over in January. So it really is a nail-biting time around the continent. But let's bring in now Brick Medak. Brick is joining us today from Berlin as well. He's the head of the Berlin office of the think tank Third Generation Environmentalism. So Brick, thank you so much. It's lovely to have you on the panel and bring in your thoughts. So how have you been reacting over the last couple of days to the results?
Yeah, hi all. Thanks for the invitation. Looking forward to the discussion today. First of all, there are 2 points I agree with Paul. First of all, it's a pretty much predictable earthquake that happened over here in Germany. So not really unexpected. Looking at the polls, were quite accurate this time, at least. So we are moving to some kind of, I'd say, European normalcy. The era of the big, large 10 parties, SPD, CDU, CSU is obviously over. And I think this is a good thing. Germany is kind of getting more European in some ways. Next thing I'd like to stress, and this is something that Paul already mentioned, the talks have to go on fast. We need a incoming German government before Christmas. Looking at the French election next year, looking at the French EU presidency, and also at the German G7 presidency. We simply need a government to take office as soon as possible. Last time it took 6 months. This time it can't take 6 months. Thanks.
This month, it cannot take 6 months. We need a German government. That's the words of Brick Medak there in Berlin. So let's bring in Franziska and Sven. I mean, how long could it take? Could it take more than 6 months? I mean, bring us into the rooms there, the negotiating rooms. Tell us about last night. Like, are you guys friends yet? What do you have in common? What are your differences?
No, I think that we cannot predict the time. I think everybody is aware that we have to be speedy. For our European partners, as many of you have said, we know that the French presidency is looming. We know that we have a big Fit for 55 package that needs to be negotiated, and that everybody's saying, climate can't wait. And of course, it will be important how the new German government will position itself on this topic. So there are a number of dossiers waiting where we all are aware that it needs a quick government procedure, but at the same time, you never know. And I think that we are off on a good start. I think it was good to have joint conversations with the Liberals first. As Sven said, unfortunately, the FDP is often closer to Chancellor Kurz than to President Macron, even though they are with the Liberals in one group in the European Parliament. So we'll see where they are moving. I hope that we can create a joint framework for investing in Europe's future in terms of, be it technologies, infrastructure, research. And I hope that we can find a bridge there. But, on many dossiers, it's been difficult. And maybe it's also good if other liberals from the EU that are more on a progressive way do contact and influence their liberal partners in Germany.
So Sven, what will your role be then? I mean, when you come back from Berlin and you're here in Brussels, will you be mingling with the Renew Europe group and trying to get down to talk to them and come to agreements on different issues that perhaps you would have voted on differently in the past?
Well, look, at the moment, I'm not by chance in Berlin because I will be part of the smaller group to prepare for the talks. And that is a big task. So basically, I will work now from Berlin, and I will work closely with Franziska, who has also a role to defend all the different European issues in the negotiations. It's also we always say that we are a Europe party, and therefore, of course, the European group also sits at the table in Berlin. Beyond that, Franziska was formerly a member of the European Parliament and unfortunately left our delegation in order to be in the Bundestag, which I still regret. But it gives us the possibility to work now together on this. So then I was also intrigued by the remark of Paul that you are scared of the German FDP. Well, I think with this attitude, we would be in a difficult position. I fully agree with Franziska that we need the influence of the President de la République and his movement in order to help us to achieve more in the coalition. However, I think such a coalition can only work based on trust. So this means we must find solutions in the most difficult issues, which are not scaring anyone. So, and that is that will be a big political task, in particular with a view to some of the EU issues, where we have to find solutions which can function for the partners and function for Europe. And so, for instance, when it comes to building more European democracy and more capacity to act, institutional reforms, I see convergence with the liberals. I would be amazed if France could join us in supporting transnational lists in order to have more European democracy, as was advocated by Mr. Macron before his election, but unfortunately not supported when he was elected. But building more European democracy and more capacity to act, which means majority voting in all areas and building smaller groups of countries for specific areas of deeper integration if needed, making the European Conference on the Future of Europe a success, there I would see a lot of overlap. Also when it comes to the rule of law. And there I see that France has been very outspoken, where I was sometimes waiting for the German government to be outspoken. Here also I see more convergence. We have certainly problems when it comes to financial rules. There we really have differences between liberals and Greens, where I would hope for some potential overlap and cooperation is when it comes to investment. For the liberals, more investment is very important, private, and I would say also a larger share of investment in the spending of the state. This is also important for the Greens. So perhaps this would be a common idea on which a common policy can be built, because the cynic position, which was suggested by Mr. Scholz to say, look, we have common fiscal rules, they have enough flexibility, means de facto we have bad rules and they will not be implemented anyway. Whether this is a good guarding principle for a common currency, I doubt very much. I would prefer to have good rules which are then vigorously enforced. That is perhaps a better idea. And of course, I agree with Franziska on the priority for having a strong German negotiation position on all the climate issues, which must be a top priority in order to make Fit for 55 work. And yeah, okay, these would be a few points.
Thank you so much, Sven Giegold. Well, let's stick to that topic of the Fit for 55 package and the European Green Deal, the EU's man on the moon moment that we've been looking at very carefully here in Brussels over the last couple of months, and we'll be keeping a close eye on. Because I guess if you look at the Greens in Germany, and of course in the Parliament, they want a date, for example, for the sale of polluting cars to be pushed forward to 2030. The EU, the Commission has set a date now for 2035, but the FDP opposes this. So Francesca, these are kind of issues that when you get down to the hard talk about policy, you're going to have major clashes.
Yeah, it's been interesting in the campaign that the Liberals said that they want to achieve all the climate goals via pricing, via the EU emission trading schemes, the old one and the new one, and at the same time said no to higher, prices for driving cars. So nothing will become more expensive, but we do everything via the pricing. So it was a sort of, I thought not a very honest campaign answer, because if you do everything via pricing, everything will become very expensive if you really want to achieve your climate targets. And there again, I think it's quite interesting that the Liberals in Germany do set everything on the price, while, for example, Macron and other Liberals do not do so. They had their Yellow Vest moments and know what it means if you don't go via some regulatory measures. And I hope that they are, will also see that we need to have a way that is socially just and doesn't, in the end, not destroy our democracies. And like we have to, bring together climate, prosperity, and keeping our liberal democracies alive. And I think that's the challenge we all have to meet. So again, there, I think, it would be quite interesting to bring the liberal European debate to the FDP. So, let's see how this goes. But I'm hopeful that, if they sit down at the negotiation table, it's no longer at the debate table where you can say everything and say the opposite at the same time, like everything we do via pricing and nothing will get more expensive. That just doesn't function at the negotiation table. There you have to become real. And I think that will help us because, if you do it via the pricing, they will have to then face also the consequences. And I'm not sure they are. So in a way, I hope that reality helps us.
Well, let's get Brick's take on this. Brig Medak, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree very much with Franziska. First of all, ETS is not the silver bullet. It's part of a toolkit, but it's only one tool within, a set of 10, 20, 15 tools and legislation packages. So this obviously, again, the deliverables, I guess the deliverables, have to realize that, only taking ETS or carbon pricing as the number one solution is obviously not going to work out. Another thing where I'm a little worried looking at the Liberals is actually the social dimension of the 55 package, also the European Green Deal, because that is still very weak. And, the package will fail if we don't improve the social dimension, meaning underpinning all this legislation which has been discussed or is coming our way still at the end of the year, looking at the gas package and some others too. We do have a social climate fund, which is not bad, but it doesn't cover all the legislation that is coming our way. So the social dimension underpinning all that has been already presented by a stronger social dimension, by more money, obviously, wherever that may come from, would be quite important. And that's why I'm a little worried looking at the Liberals, to be honest.
Okay, and Paul Morris, what about you? I mean, you're obviously very familiar there in France with the Yellow Vest movement, and that's been the argument as well, that the fear that we'll see more Yellow Vest movements as the continent transitions towards carbon neutrality. What would be your take there?
I would like to say I am not afraid first of the capacity of the German party to make compromises. And, we made some infographics at the IFRI, and I can show that. Yeah, it's on the website, and you see that. And we saw that there is a lot of common points, issues between liberals and Greens on the European questions. But the most problem is on the foreign policy, foreign and security and defense policy, and on the question, for example, on the strategic autonomy of Europe between liberals and Greens. But now about French-German cooperation. I totally agree with Franziska Brandner. There is a common point of view between the German Greens and the French LREM, Macron's party, on the European integration process, more than between LREM and the FDP, the German FDP. And there is a possibility of big cooperation between, I hope so, a Green foreign minister in Germany and the French government. But you have to be careful, as it was said, there is an election in April in France, and will Macron be the next French president? It's a big question. 1 month before the German election, we didn't know which party will be the first party, and now it's in 6 months in France. It's impossible to say who will be the next French president. And the French-German cooperation have to be government and state cooperation, and not cooperation between parties, between liberals, Greens, and so on and so on. And I am sure that all the parties now, the 4 first party in the Bundestag, CDU, SPD, FDP, and Greens, are pro-European parties, and it's a really good news. The anti-European party didn't won this election in Germany, and there is a lot of hope with this results.
Thanks, Paul. Well, at this stage, if anyone watching would like to bring in questions, start thinking of your questions and start popping them in the chat. And in the meantime, I've got a couple more questions for our panelists. And I want to ask about the campaigns and the impact that COVID and the pandemic had on the voter when they went to the ballot box on Sunday. What do you think about that? Sven, will I ask you that question first? Because I know that you have to go in a couple of minutes.
First of all, when it comes to the campaigns, one has to say that there was a lot of disinformation going on. There were studies showing that most of the disinformation was going against Annalena personally. This is also an issue we didn't discuss yet. The Greens, even if we and also she made mistakes in the beginning, we saw a lot of, I would put it, signs of structural sexism in German society, countering the competence of a young woman, questioning the trustworthiness, while the objective fact-checking so consistently have shown that the most adherent person was Annalena between the 3. The least wrong information, the least wrong facts given on TV. She was clearly the most competent person, but this was not how she was portrayed. And there were clearly problems, but beyond that, there was also outright disinformation campaigns. So I don't go into the details of it. There's an interesting study by the NGO Avas, which has quantified this. And I think we can learn from here, again, that our democracies have not yet learned how to deal effectively with them. I think it is critical that we address the issue of political micro-targeting. This is a true danger for our democracy. And second, that if false information is spread on social networks, a corrective information of equal size to all who received the fake information must be sent also through a social platform. So there must be similar measures which we have for traditional media for electronic platforms. This is a truly important issue, also with a view to the foreign influences which we had to suffer from in many democracies, mainly coming from Russia. Then when it comes to, when it comes to the campaign as such, I would say the Greens have dared to run a campaign around the idea of change. So it was very clear who voted for the Greens gets a program of change. We know now that a large part, and we know this since long, of German population is not the most change positive perspective. So if you ask people about what needs to be done on climate change, there was a very interesting opinion poll saying, yeah, climate change is super important and we want it to be tackled. And if you then ask the people how much has to be changed for this, they say, yeah, only a little bit, not too much. So, and that is, of course, I think a challenge society has not yet fully grasped. That, and there the offer of the socialists to say, we will tackle climate change, but it only means change to industry. It has nothing to do with private citizens and our way of life. This will simply not fly. However, it also shows how important a socially balanced approach is. So if we do pricing, we have also to compensate. And that is a very important issue. We cannot only compensate partially. We have to compensate fully, in particular to the poorer parts of the population. But these issues were, I think, important in the polls and in the campaign. And of course, we should not deny that we made mistakes in the beginning of the campaign, which have weakened the Green campaign, in particular in the beginning, while later on, many expected we would be totally crushed in the run-off of the campaign between Laschet and Scholz. And that didn't happen. We had a big win, and that shows that despite all that pressure, despite also our own mistakes, there is a relevant group in society which want to see green policies being implemented. And that is exactly what we will work for now.
Thanks, Sven. And what about you, Francesca? What was your personal experience with your campaign, and why was Europe so absent in the campaign? And you can probably tell us from your perspective, as you've been an MEP before and now you're in the Bundestag.
You know, I think it was, why was it not an issue? The only way it was brought into the debate was by the Schuldenunion, by the Conservatives, as a sort of fear-mongering of, oh, look, the Greens, they want to take our money away, and give it to the corrupt Italians. I'm like, that was the only thing when the Conservatives played on Europe, which I said is, you know, it's quite sad for a party of Helmut Kohl and Adenauer that the only thing they put on Europe in an election campaign is that. So in a way, you know, I was quite happy that this one didn't take on more power, because it would have been rather detrimental. We tried to set in a positive tone. We were actually the only party that had a billboard, you know, with Europe as a theme. And I did quite a number of events on European affairs. But yeah, I think the main issues really were social, economic, pension, climate, and that despite Afghanistan and all we had, the international dimension really wasn't there, which surprised me as well. I thought that afterwards you might get a debate, but I think every party was like holding back in terms of, you know, where this could lead to, and didn't. So it was the Afghanistan debate was more an internal debate, which we criticized, that it was more debated from how many refugees will come and not what does it mean for the world and Europe's position. So unfortunately, that debate was not framed as a European or foreign affairs debate, only as a refugee and the internal implications debate. So yeah, I think, you know, it's not the one reason. And I think, you know, what I think could be, I hope that if we get to manage, you know, to have a traffic light coalition, most of the forces are in favor also of returning to support for a community method, which Angela Merkel didn't have over the last 16 years. So I think that might be something that we could push for to, go away from the intergovernmental method again as a German government, and also support a stronger European Parliament, just as well as being more strict on the rule of law and democracy, and not having the appeasement course of Merkel with Orban, etc. So I think these are things that I hope we can dwell on and make it stronger.
Okay, thanks, Francesca. And just a quick question for Paul Maurice, and then I'm going to bring in, there's lots of questions coming in from the audience, so thank you so much for that. Paul, do you think the dynamics can change now in Brussels at European summits with Angela Merkel no longer sitting around the table? Because many would argue that a lot of decisions have been kind of led by her over the last couple of years. And this is the chance perhaps for Ursula von der Leyen and Charles Michel to step in.
Yeah, I hope so. But in France, the government sees that as the chance of President Macron to lead Europe, to be now the senior partner in the French-German couple. And there is the presidency of the Council of the EU in January, and it will be the occasion for President Macron to make campaign for his own re-election, and it's maybe not a good news for Europe. But he's a true European, we have to say that, and he have really some ideas for Europe, instead of the other candidates for the French presidential election. And it's always the problem in the French-German couple and the European integration. There is always a balance of power between national interest and European interest, and we have to deal with that. We have to have the good balance of power between France and Germany. And maybe, I hope so, will Ursula von der Leyen and Charles Michel take the lead of the European Union. That's not so. We'll see.
You're not so convinced. Okay, well, we'll just have to keep an eye on that. Thanks, Paul. Francesca Brantner, are you still with us? Because we have a question for you from Geert Geizert. I can also put it to Sven Giegold as well. It's a really interesting question about NATO. And the question is the strengthening of the European pillar of NATO an important goal for you? So Sven, do you want to pick up that question? We'll see if Francesca can jump in as well after.
Well, our position on this is since a long time clear. We are in favor of stronger European military cooperation. We have been supporting pooling and sharing. For instance, however, we want that any deeper integration in Europe in this area has to be followed by a deeper integration of parliamentary rights and controls. And unfortunately, the first step towards a stronger cooperation in European defense were not including the deepening of the rights of the European Parliament in this area. And therefore, a compromise for us always would mean that we want military cooperation not as an intergovernmental area of policy, but with parliamentary grounding. And of course, here we can see the historical differences between our two nations in friendship. So, as you know, Franziska, one of her most difficult decisions she has to take is whether to send a soldier abroad. This is a decision which is not taken by Parliament in France. However, this is one of the fundamental consequences of the war from a German and the atrocities of fascism. So therefore, when we move further in European integration, for us, this must also follow a parliamentarism in this area. And therefore, and second, when deepening the security policy, this is not only military. I would say we need more sharing and pooling and more common military resources, sourcing, research, and also with a view to common operations and the capacities for it. But we also need a strong upgrade in civil conflict prevention. And one of the key convictions of green foreign policy is that preventing war with non-military measures is clearly the first thing to do. And therefore, too quickly when we discuss security policy, we discuss only NATO. We are not against NATO. We are in favor of an integrated Germany, including in NATO. This was a big debate in opposition to our, what you would call, gauchist party in Germany. But we also honor and want to strengthen the civil mechanisms in order to avoid military conflict. Therefore, it goes too fast when we always discuss first NATO. But Franziska knows much more about all this than I do. I'm an economic freak, and I'm therefore looking forward to what Franziska will be correcting me in.
Well, we have a couple of questions for you as well from audience members, but is Franziska still with us? Because I think she is, yeah. Do you want to jump in? And then Paul, I think you want to jump in as well. I saw you waving away. So I'll give the floor to Franziska and then to you, Paul.
Yeah, no, thank you. I actually just had to drink and eat something because I haven't eaten anything all day. And I was just feeling that I'm getting really weak. And I realized, I haven't eaten since 7:30 this morning.
That kind of weak, huh?
Yeah. So
I hope you got something in there.
Same with me, Franziska. Same with me. Can I leave now? No.
Well, by the way, this is a webinar. Everyone's free to have a coffee, munch away while they chat. I mean, it's
I felt like bad to eat in front of the camera, but I really had to eat something.
Well, now that you're fed and watered, maybe you can bring in your take there on that question that came from one of our audience members about NATO.
Yeah, no, I heard Sven, and I think, what he said, that these are the most difficult decisions. He's really right. Especially in our group, the decisions on where to send our army is always one that is sure for debate and long discussions. Because I think, you have there so much responsibility and you can't change course quickly. You have that path dependency, which has quite heavy consequences. So on NATO, it's for us, the transatlantic partnership is indispensable. But we also say that we need to build up a European strategic sovereignty. And one dimension of that is military, but not alone. And I think, when we talk about NATO and 2% goal, we always said, what our goal is to define European capabilities we need to do the missions, the interventions we want to do or to be able to do. And then once we have defined these capabilities, to procure them jointly. That in the end might be more expensive, less expensive, or same as 2%. Also depends, of course, always on the growth of our economies, as it's a percentage of that. So in a way, our aim is to create synergies, to define jointly the capabilities. Also, of course, in conversation with our American partners, but also really as Europeans. But in addition to that, we certainly need institutional reforms to move away from unanimity to qualified majority voting. And we need to, also invest more in other areas, like our digital sovereignty, where the German government, the current one, has been rather, working together with Huawei instead of Ericsson and Nokia. And when I see that the German government is now using even EU funds to strengthen Open RAN, which is again, not a European project, and this weakening our European companies, I'm really always surprised why Olaf Scholz is calling for a European dimension, when at the same time he's funding with taxpayers' money the competitors of our European digital actors. So in that sense, I think this is much more than military side. The net, the cyber is so important. Also health for me is important on that one. Energy, we have been against Nord Stream 2. We wanted to work with our European partners. So I think hopefully we can move Germany from a foreign and European policy based on our exports, turning it toward a policy based on our joint interests.
Okay, lots of issues there to get stuck into. Paul Morris, do you want to come in briefly, and then we'll bring in Sven? Because Sven, we have a question on the reforms of the EU fiscal rules that I'm sure you're perfectly placed to answer.
Yeah, I would like to say that there is a cultural strategical difference between France and Germany, and France doesn't understand that the Bundeswehr, parliamentary army, is a parliamentary army. And I would like to say, because in France, the Greens are seen as a pacifist party and so on. I would like to say that the first foreign minister in Germany who sent a soldier in combat mission was Joschka Fischer. And it was the first time that the Bundeswehr had to fight. And it's maybe, there is maybe some points, some differences. For example, I would like, sorry, Franziska Brandner, but the EU theme is a problem between France and Germany. And the vote of the Greens against the continuation of the EU theme mission in Sahel is not a good thing for France. And it will be, I don't speak, I'm not the French government. I just see the reaction of the French government. And it will be on the French side a big question. What will the Greens do on a foreign ministry? And we have to say, okay, there is, and Franziska said, that's really good. There is a lot of points who are not defense and security policy in the foreign policy.
Okay. Thanks so much, Paul. Now we're going to switch topics and talk about EU fiscal rules, and a question from Katja Reuter saying, Sven, that you were speaking about hopefully finding agreement with the FDP through a focus on investments, but the FDP is also more fiscally conservative, and the CDU as well. The SDP is more open to reforms, but Olaf Scholz, as Chancellor candidate, has spoken out against Eurobonds. So the question from Katja is, how do you see the chances for the Greens in various coalition constellations to make changes to the EU fiscal rules?
First, the irony is that fiscal conservatism has led to monetary laxism. So if you ask the Germans what they find worse, I would say, in doubt, I would see a good chance that in order to contain a bit excessive monetary laxism, there is some more openness for an agreement for common fiscal policy. Second, everyone in Germany in the pro-European parties wants the European Capital Markets Union and the European Banking Union. In the end, there are problems with this, with the deposit guarantee schemes, and we know this, and this is a measure of its own. But in general, everybody knows we need to integrate the capital markets. When we do this, we cannot successfully do this without also having more control over fiscal policy. So therefore, I hope that in these talks, we can find compromise, taking the best of each other's policies. Beyond that, the position of Scholz in the election, he has taken a lot of positions which I'm not so sure whether they will be upheld fully after the elections. I can give you a long list of examples, but on the Eurobonds, it's in a certain way funny, because while he was saying that, the European Union was issuing Eurobonds. So that is German humor. We are not most famous for this, but I find it quite amusing. And so beyond that, we have with the European Investment Bank, since a long time, Eurobonds. Nobody cares in Germany. So let's try to get away from symbolic terms to economic substance. And we discuss economic substance. I think there's more chances of finding common ground. But I can only assure everyone, one thing German Greens will not agree with, and that is a return back to austerity. Because if we would enforce the current fiscal framework as it is, it would force a permanent recession in Greece and Italy. Nobody can want that. It's not in the interest of German industry. It's not in the interest of Europe. It's of the interest of no one. I don't start with the social issues. So therefore, I think there is room for reason and compromise. But we have to avoid putting our partners into symbolic defeats. And I think on this basis, there is a chance for agreement. But we have to avoid cornering anyone with symbolic terms. That doesn't help.
Okay.
So we will certainly not come out with the negotiations being in favor of Eurobonds. This will not happen. But the EIB issuing additional investment bonds, why not? So I'm only opening a bit ideas and spaces.
Paul or Brick, would you like to react to that?
Yeah, may I chip in with my take on Olaf Scholz? I mean, in the end, it was Olaf Scholz who brokered the deal around, a COVID-19 recovery with Le Maire. So there's obviously a strong axis, Olaf Scholz, Le Maire and Macron, which is good in, keeping the Franco-German engine running and quite important looking at coming years, as long as Olaf Scholz turns out Chancellor, of course. So that is one thing. Plus also looking at, the global minimum tax. That was also a German-French, let's say more or less project, also run by the axis Le Maire and Scholz. So I'm not really worried that, Scholz will be such a problematic figure when it comes to the fiscal union, because he was the one who mentioned, Hamiltonian moment last year when we had that discussion, and nothing of this would have happened with the Conservatives being, being in charge of these topics. So I'm actually very confident that Olaf Scholz will be pushing the fiscal union forward, and especially with the Greens at his side.
Paul, anything to add? No? Okay. Brick, what you said at the start during your first intervention was all you want to see is a government fast. And we have a question kind of similar to that now coming from Moritz Schleicher. So Moritz, thank you so much for your question. And it is, given the more and more complicated constellations for building up coalitions in Germany, but also in other countries like the Netherlands, Belgium, and might even happen in France, he says, does this not block decisions on European level for too long a time? He asks, do you think the Liberals will support major changes in the setup of the European Union? Franziska or Sven, do you want to go for that one?
We are parliamentarians. We need you to give us the floor. Such we can't deal with this way of,
Okay, then go for it.
Okay, that's, thank you. No, look, Moritz, my take on this would be, it depends. I hope that this time it will not take so long. Usually the Liberals are always in favor of efficiency. We are also in favor of efficiency. So let's see, so efficiency is an ecological principle. And therefore, I would really think we have also a European responsibility. The objective should be to try to finalize the negotiations until the end of the year, because if we see the calendar in Europe, we see an upcoming French presidency, and this is a big opportunity for Europe to make progress. And if we waste this with a lack of a German government, we are weakening not only the French presidency, but the whole construction of Europe. So I think I will certainly make that point, and I hope that after all the talks, there is a growing understanding that the first mandate to form a government is with Mr. Scholz and not with the loser of the election, Mr. Laschet. So any influence on the Christian Democrats to explain them who loses an election and who wins based on basic mathematics would already be helpful.
Thank you, Sven. And Franziska, same question to you, but also I would like to know, if the Greens are in government, which issues will you be prioritising then on the European stage?
How fast will it be? Will it paralyze Europe? I think luckily, usually Europe continues despite difficult negotiations in some member states. But we will see how fast it goes. I think the most important is the Fit for 55, to really get that package off the ground in a very ambitious way. I think that is key for Europe. I hope that we can, have a different position, as I said earlier, on democracy, the rule of law, a much stricter one. I hope that we will find solutions on migration, asylum, which has been blocked for so many years, where we are ready to go ahead with a few. I hope we can do steps in terms of what Sven said earlier to protect our democracy when it comes to the digital sphere, because I really see that we need to have a stricter, rules-based approach to that sector. And at the same time, we can invest in our joint infrastructure, be it transport, energy, and have that advance. So these are some of the points. And then, yes, institutionally, we will see if we can advance on strengthening the European Parliament, moving from unanimity to qualified majority voting in a number of areas. Let's see.
And the social issues as well, and equality issues. There's like this directive on putting women on board. It's been blocked for about a decade here because the CDU were blocking it for so long. I wonder, if the Greens were in government, would you prioritise these kind of issues and try and get them passed? Sven, I saw you put up your hand, so the floor is yours.
No, I'm just annoyed because of this, but I leave this to Franziska. I have been listening to these sort of arguments for such a long time, and it's perhaps Franziska allows me as a man to make the point that there are so many studies demonstrating that boards of supervisors and boards function better if you have more diversity and gender parity. So I really don't see why this is not going to happen. And I would also see there a greater possibility in the new constellation. However, also the Liberals were not the greatest fans of binding rules, which I find a bit confusing because equal opportunities and equal chances is a key value of economic liberalism. So, another issue for complicated discussions, but you can be sure we know that Greens in particular fight for the equal rights of women.
Yeah, and it's also very interesting to hear from men on that. So I'm actually very pleased to hear from you on that. So thank you.
Maybe I can just add very quickly. I think it will be, the Liberals have been opposing that for a long time. So the Social Democrats are officially in favor, but we will see if it comes down, if they do also prioritize it. I think the Greens won't be the problem on this one.
And we have a question here from Julius Himmler, which I really like. So thank you, Julius, for this question. I wonder if we will see a general speed limit in Germany. It was part of the programme of the Greens, while Liberals always call out the freedom of the German highways. It's these kind of issues, he says, where I really don't see how these two parties will get together without giving up their ideals. Who can answer that question?
Probably
we mentioned the car industry, Franziska.
Probably we will get to a speed limit by having electric cars, because usually as soon as you go beyond 130, it takes so much away from the battery that you don't drive faster. So probably we will get the speed limit via this. I don't know. I think, it's become such an ideological debate in Germany. It's a bit sometimes difficult to explain to our European friends that for some voters, this is the decisive issue. But I've met many during the election campaign who said, no, I'm all in favor of climate, I'm all in favor of the green issue, but I want to drive 180 on the German highway. Well, I always say, is this real? Are you really basing your decision for the future of this country based on your speed limit? And then they tell you, yes, that's for me, that's so important. And it's hard to explain this to anybody living outside Germany, but it is true. It's become a highly symbolized, ideological, to a certain extent, debate, even though, when you look on the ground and the facts, there's almost no civilized country in the world that has no speed limit.
Yeah, I find it petrifying. But anyway, we'll move on. We have another question for you, Franziska Bratner. You mentioned the new German government should take a stronger stance on Hungary and Poland, on the governments. Do you think it would be a good idea that a national government, in particular the German one, would try to teach and correct the Hungarian and Polish governments bilaterally? Don't you think this would create high tensions and that this should be left to EU level? That's a question there from Michael Schunger on rule of law issues for Franziska Bratner.
Yeah, I don't think that you can divide like this, like a national and European level, because of course the German government acts at the European level. And I had hoped that the German government would support the decision by the European Parliament to call on the EU Commission to start working on the rule of law mechanism. So, this is where national and European level comes together. And yes, I think, also in bilaterals, you can on the one side have more cooperation, for example, with Poland on the coal exit and create joint approaches to exiting coal, because the region is de facto one. There is a border, but it's one region. So I think, there's room for enhanced cooperation, which the current government didn't use. And then the other side, that we are quite clear and strict when it comes to the rule of law and democracy, yes.
And Brick or Paul, do you want to make a comment there? No, you're good. And Brick, did you want to make a comment about the previous question?
Yeah, I'm going to chip in on this, Peter. I mean, that's a highly symbolic topic, but it's not really very high on the agenda. Looking at climate and energy, Germany has to deal with some other issues that are way important, like moving the coal phase out date from 2038 to 2030, starting a gas phase out discussion actually also at the same time, boosting renewables. So there are way more important topics than the speed limit. It's a nice to have one. And just reminding everyone, Christian Lindner drives a Porsche. He will never get the speed limit with Christian Lindner being part of the incoming government, I'm afraid. Just kidding. But he really drives a Porsche. That's not a joke. So.
But that is true. And I know at least one other member of the coming negotiation. But there's one other country where you can still drive without limit, and that's North Korea. So there's an alternative.
Okay. Another question here for you, Sven Giegold, from Tommy Simpson. It's in the view of the move to a common corporation tax, spearheaded by Germany and France, does Die Grünen have any proposals to support the economies of peripheral countries, pigs they put in brackets, especially because Germany was seen as the enforcer of what we discussed earlier, strict austerity, which caused an increase in poverty in these countries? That question there from Tommy Simpson on the common corporation tax for you, Sven Giegold.
I didn't get the connection between the two issues. So between the common corporation tax and the question of poverty. I really have could you read the text as it was?
I don't want to take it out of context. So he says, in view of the move to a common corporation tax, spearheaded by Germany and France, do you have any proposals to support the economies of peripheral countries?
Yeah, but that presupposes that the main reason why actors invest in peripheral countries is because of aggressive tax competition. I was just in Bulgaria. I found that interesting. I was with the finance minister of the interim government, who is a really interesting guy who wants to end corruption and is really an interesting guy. And he told me the following: Bulgaria has one of the lowest corporation tax rates, and German companies, as well as other international companies, do not effectively pay tax in Bulgaria because the 9% in Bulgaria are too high for them. They shift their profits to certain countries cantons in Switzerland, where the effective tax rate is 1%. So what's the point? So the claim that you can compete effectively by staying in the logic of a race to the bottom is wrong. Giving privileges to investment in certain regions, also tax-based privileges, this is a discussion I would always be open to. But this logic to compete with the tax rate is one of the most inefficient ways in order to develop a peripheral region. Beyond that, between the peripheral regions, there are then lots of beggar my neighbor policies. So therefore, I have to say, increasing in common investment, financing this in a solidaristic way in Europe, and by that way supporting the development of peripheral regions, yes. With this argument justifying continuous tax competition, no.
Okay. So there's lots more questions, but we're starting to run out of time. I'll just give you a flavor of them, and perhaps we can bring them in when we meet again in a couple of months or a couple of weeks when the government is formed. If we do have time, we can bring the one in the Western Balkans, because I think it is pretty important. Svetlana asking what the panel thinks on the position of the next German government, whether it's traffic light or Jamaica, on enlargement to the Western Balkans, with yesterday Reuters publishing an article saying that EU member states no longer agree on Balkan membership guarantee, and France heading this group of countries. So my question is to the panel, could Germany influence this tendency? So I might just throw that question out to you, and then we'll probably have to almost start wrapping up. Brick, do you want to tackle that?
Happy to do so, because I'm actually originally from Croatia, even though I spent most of my time in Germany. So kind of an expert on that region. But actually, I'm afraid, since it used to be a very important topic for Merkel, that this will not be much of an issue for the incoming government, to be honest.
Yeah. Paul?
Sorry, all parties are on the principle agreed, but we have to see what's coming with the Western Balkans, and there is a question about delays and so on.
Francesca?
I would not agree with Break. And for us, this is really important. We have been constantly working on this. Huh?
Good to know.
Yeah, no, it's really, unfortunately, the person who has been working very hard for us on this, Manuel Sarrazin, has not been re-elected, or we didn't get good enough of a result to have him back in the parliament, which is a real shame. But I myself know the Balkans not as well as Manuel, but also a bit, and I'm, a big defender there. And I've on this one, we really have a different approach than Macron.
Okay, and the EU Western Balkans Summit, of course, is taking place next Wednesday.
Yeah.
And Sven, final word from you on that?
Well, no, I simply agree with Franziska. I would only like to say that, of course, we would insist that progress in the inner relations in the Western Balkans and is key at the same time, as well as fighting corruption and ensuring the rule of law. But however, we want the full integration for the Western Balkans based on the respective conditions. So this is not something we hide behind. I think that's also a question of a strategic interest of Europe and of strategic importance for the stability on our continent in the region.
And we have a question there from Matsik. He's asking what the biggest surprise for you in the elections was. Maybe a quick rapid buzzer round. Paul, we start with you.
The SPD won an election, and by coming first, it's really a big surprise. But with his 2013 score, it's also a surprise. First with lowest score.
The socialist victory, the big surprise for you, Brick.
That the left didn't make it into parliament. I mean, they did, but there's only a few people left, and that's really a shame, to be honest.
Yeah, Die Linke doing a lot of soul searching now. Francesca, biggest surprise for you?
Surprised that we won so many direct seats.
That you won so many direct seats. And then Sven Giegold?
Surprises. I don't miss the left much, but we don't need them in North Rhine-Westphalia. We are green enough. That is greetings to next door. No, but a big surprise. I would say I was surprised that the relative changes in our votes in different regions. This I didn't expect. So we won in some regions like Saxony and North Rhine-Westphalia more. And we had more problems, for instance, in Baden-Württemberg, not where Franziska was running, but in some other areas. And this needs a careful analysis. Who voted for green change and who voted less? And this surprised me. This geography I didn't expect.
Okay, Sven, thank you so much. Thanks to you. Thank you, Franziska. Thank you, Paul Maurice. Thank you, Brick. And to our viewers, one final question for you. We want to know what coalition you think will govern in Germany after the federal election. So if you look at your screens, it should be popping up that poll. Do you think it will be the traffic light one, the Apple one, the SPD, Ample even, not Apple, I'm obviously hungry too, the SPD, Greens and the Liberals, or will it be the Jamaica, the CDU's, the Greens and the Liberals, or the Große Koalition, or another, or you don't know. So you can just put your answers there so we have a little bit of a taste of what you think is coming, even though nobody can predict the time. So which coalition our viewers think will govern in Germany after those elections? In just a couple of seconds, we should be able to see the results of that. And in the meantime, I want to thank you so much all for joining us today for this event. It's been so fascinating. Thank you so much to all our participants for giving up your time on what is a very busy day, for being with us. And hopefully now we can see the results coming up. Traffic light. That's what everyone's going for, 73%. Okay, great. Good to know. Thank you so much to all our viewers. Thank you very much to you all. Take care and all the best.
Bye.
Tschüss, danke fürs Organisieren.
Vielen Dank, schön, dass Sie da waren.